Hello, this is Pastor Matthew Woods from Grace Lutheran Church, and this is the daily update for Tuesday, March 31st. Well, it's the end of March and the end of the first 2 weeks of our isolation and the end of the 15-day trial period that we were all hoping would reveal something that would end all of this. But in 2 weeks, much has happened, and we've learned a lot more, and as we look ahead, we know that there is much more waiting we're going to have to do. However, as we look ahead, we also want to realize that vigilance is much needed for the days ahead. So I was thinking about this recently. I stumbled upon a new reality not too long back, and it made me think of this. I was completely unaware of this, but if you're driving a new car, chances are that you are not checking your oil enough. That's correct. That's right. According to my local mechanic, there are new design trends in newer cars, and these cars are designed to use more oil than they used to. It seems like a paradox to me, since with the new synthetic oils, you're supposed to be able to go longer in mileage, 5,000 miles or so. Of course, most dealers will not tell you this, and any sales sticker on the window will not likely show you miles per quart next to the miles per gallon sticker on the window. But the responsibility is yours, in fact, as an owner, and you should know this reality. In the old days, older cars would consume oil. It was sort of expected. I can remember sitting at a stop sign not so long ago, a few years ago now. My wife and I were sitting on State Street waiting for the light to turn, and in front of us was an older vehicle using a lot of oils, burning and blowing smoke right out of its tailpipe, so thick that when the light turned green, it blasted out a plume of blue smoke so thick that I thought I was in a James Bond movie and that he was trying to lose me. I just couldn't see, so I didn't even go yet. We giggled a little bit as the cloud cleared a little more. And as one who buys old cars, taking care of oil is an important thing. I'm used to losing oil, burning oil, and sweating it out on the driveway. I'm used to these things because these are the kinds of cars I drive. However, my wife, her car is a newer car. It's a 2014 smaller SUV. It's black. Now, I'm not trying to embarrass anyone. However, according to its manufacturer, it's acceptable for this car to use oil. It's expected. This means that as an owner of this vehicle, I have to keep watch on the oil so that I don't lose too much oil and start having mechanical trouble, which is what happens when you lose too much oil. And so, to the surprise, when I talked to another person who was just recently becoming aware of this as well, he and I were discussing this just last week. We were talking about this, and he was surprised as I was to learn that newer vehicles use oil. It's what they're designed to do, and that we will have to pay more attention to that. And I would certainly encourage you to pay more attention to that. The oil level is such a simple thing, however, and well within our reach, that keeping an eye on it is not so hard. So it's important that we maintain our vigilance and our awareness and our attention. Likewise, today we have a similar call to attention, to be vigilant about health, about watching out for the virus. Consider Nehemiah 4. It says, "So we rebuilt the wall till all of it reached half of its height, for the people worked with all of their heart. Therefore I stationed the people behind the lowest points of the wall at the exposed places, posting them by families with their swords, their spears, and bows. After I looked things over, I stood up and said to the nobles, the officials, and the rest of the people, 'Don't be afraid of him. Remember the Lord, who is great and awesome, and fight for your brothers, your sons and your daughters, your wives, and your homes.'" Nehemiah was a cupbearer for the king of Persia, who was sent to Jerusalem to rebuild the walls of the city which had been destroyed by the Babylonians 75 years or so before in 586 BC. Neighboring leaders around Jerusalem, who operated more like mob bosses, mocked and ridiculed the Israelites for rebuilding the wall. However, once the wall got halfway finished and they realized Nehemiah was serious about this, they stopped just mocking and teasing and instead started making threats. These enemies of Jerusalem did not want the wall built because an independent Jerusalem would mean these neighboring mob bosses would lose their control, their power that they had gained over these Israelites. But half a wall is not enough. Because the threat was serious and real, Nehemiah changed tactics on the fly. He prayed and he encouraged the people of Jerusalem to stick together here in chapter 4 and to set up a network that would counteract the threat of the fear. There was no way to know if and when Israel's enemies would ever strike. So until the wall was finished, half the men guarded the wall while the other half kept building it, and they took turns. And those who were building it, by the way, kept their swords handy just in case. Nehemiah set up an alarm system so that if a horn blew, all the Israelites were to drop everything and rally to that place in order to fight. Nehemiah also reminded the people that what they were protecting was not just a wall. They were protecting their sons, their daughters, their wives, and homes, their families. And so for the next month or so, they kept building until it was all finished. And under the guidance and leadership of Nehemiah, their entire community stayed vigilant because the threat of harm remained hanging over them. And so there was an urgency to it. And we'll remember that their vigilance paid off. In a record time, in 52 days, the wall was finished. Now, there are many lessons we gain from Nehemiah. Why my nose is itching so bad? There are many lessons we gain from Nehemiah as we hear the news that we're going to be socially distant for another month until the end of April. We just got this news yesterday. Social distancing means that we're going to be putting up some walls of our own. 6 feet apart, parents are suddenly homeschooling their kids. Going to the office means logging in. And everything we touch is approached with a sense of Lysoled caution. We're not building a wall of defense for our community, not just for our community and not just for our country, but especially for our sons, our daughters, for our spouses, for our families and loved ones. And maybe we wear a mask instead of a sword, but our actions will deter an enemy from bringing any harm when we remain vigilant in these things. Looking at another month of separation feels in some ways like being only halfway finished with building a wall to keep away the enemies that threaten. And in some ways, building a wall, building anything, for me feels a lot more welcome because at least I would know in some sense what finishing a wall looks like. Fighting a virus is not so comfortably defined, and that really is the hard part. We don't know when or if the enemy will strike or if it'll come at all, but we have to remain ready. The good news is that we are learning more and more every day, and test kits are becoming more efficient and more common, and we're gaining on this thing. The Israelites maintained a sense of urgency in their work, and so shall we. Likewise, keeping up our guards means that the virus is not going to get in without a fight. And so it's so important that we remain vigilant for our families, for our community. We also learn from Nehemiah to adapt. Sometimes right in the middle of it all, we got to kind of change gears on the fly. A few weeks ago, most of us were driving to work and interacting with others, thinking nothing of viruses, even though the news began to trickle out of China. Now we literally live online, an online world, because our culture has had to adapt. And the most noted heroes today are those that are much closer to home. The medical people, the grocery clerks, the truck drivers, distributors, tech people, the folks having the most direct impact on our well-being in our families. The fact is they've always been important. And this has given us a great opportunity to notice and say thank you for what they do. As we know well, adapting means now washing our hands 20 seconds longer than we used to, perhaps. Wiping down things has become more regular, more routine, more of a priority, because we know that we don't want to let the virus get a foothold no matter what. And so we keep taking away its opportunities by doing these things. We may yet fine-tune our tactics in the days ahead, but everything we do builds a stronger defense, a more awareness, a greater vigilance, and a greater guard for the sake of those we love, with the added benefit of helping one another as well in our community. I pray for vigilance. Vigilance is the order of the day. Cars don't run well with low oil and don't go anywhere without it. We don't run well on viruses. But vigilance is not new to us Christians. Keeping our guards up against temptation is an everyday battle. It's what we do. We know how to do it. Yet one truth stands above all others as we think about all of this. None is more vigilant and more aware than our Lord. No one knows our needs and what is most necessary than our Lord. None is more determined to destroy the world's greatest enemies of sin and death than Jesus and his cross and in his resurrection. None has done more or is doing more to ensure the safety and the future of your family than Jesus. And that's where our confidence lies. And that's what our vigilance takes hold of, as it did with Nehemiah back in his day. And now the Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face shine on you and be gracious to you. The Lord look upon you with his favor and forever and always give you his peace. Thanks for tuning in. God be with you.